Hey, what's up, grade 10s? Mr. Martins here coming at you with week 4 of the COVID-19 quarantine. Hope you guys are holding out and hope you guys are doing well and staying safe and getting your homework done. This too shall pass. We won't be in this forever, and someday we'll all look back on it and say, I remember when. But when you're going through it, sometimes you just can't see the end. But I can tell you the end is coming at some point and not too far in the future. At least I hope so. Anyway, this week we are going to carry on with our discussion on loops, and we're going to look at a couple of T-Kinter assignments that I want you to hand in for marking. Now, speaking of marking, maybe you've noticed I've started to mark some of those drop boxes, so the work you do at home does count towards your mark. So try to keep up, try to reach out to me if you have any problems or any questions at all. All right, so before we start this week's lesson, I want to recap last week's lesson. So one of the things I would like you to do is bring up the loop worksheet that I sent you last week that we worked on in last week's lesson. Now, if you haven't started this yet, that means you didn't do last week's lesson, so make sure you do week 3 before you do week 4, and try to keep up and do one per week so that you don't fall behind. So I'm not going to go over what we did last week, but I'm going to fill out what we didn't finish from last week because I wanted to leave some of it for review this week just to remind you of what we learned in week 3. So the big deal of week 3 was talking about loops, okay, or the ability to have your code repeat a bunch of lines of code for as long as you want. Okay, so one of the more popular types of loops that we looked at was the for loop. So something like for, x in range, say 10 10 comma 20, right? And then I'm just going to print x. Okay, so this is going to generate a number sequence from 10 to 19 going up by 1 at a time. And there you go, 10 to 19. All right. By default, it goes up by 1 and doesn't go to the last number, right? And this is all stuff we learned last week. Okay, if I wanted to go to actually 20, I'd have to make this go to 21. Okay, now I can also go like this, comma 2, and now I'm just going up by every other number. So this will be the even numbers, really, from 10 to 20, as you can see here. All right, we can also go backwards, right? So I can go from a high number to a low number, so I can go from, like, say, 100 down to -1 and -10 at a time. Okay, so this is going to generate the numbers 100, 90, 80, 70, all the way down to 0, okay? Because as soon as we go past 0, we hit -1, and that's where it stops. All right, but I have to put -1 in there if I want it to reach 0. All right, so a for loop is nothing more than like a number generator. All right, but then we looked at ways that we could use it in different actual programs. So of the programs we did last week, guys, the one that I liked the best was the golf score because it incorporated both for loops and while true loops, which is the other kind of loop we learned last week. So let me start by looking at that program one more time. So we wrote this last week, if I can find it here. Here it is, okay? And this was the final version of the golf scorekeeper. All right, so inside the for loop, it also incorporates a while true and even covers this other thing I taught last week called try and except and continue. All right, so let me just go through this with you one more time. This is going to create a variable called hole that's going to go from 1 to 9 for 9 holes of golf. All right, we're going to try to get a shot from the user. All right, and they're going to enter a score for hole %D, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 9. All right, now the reason we're trying this is because they may enter a word like banana or apple or something that's not an integer. Okay, if that happens, an error is going to be thrown out, and we can catch that error here and tell them that it's an error. All right, and then right after that, this continue means go back up to the while true and try again. All right, so the purpose of the while true is to trap the user at each hole until they give us a number that we're looking for. All right, so one of the things we do first is we make sure that it is an actual integer. If it's not, then it kicks us back up to here and we try again. If we do enter an integer, we're not out of the loop yet, because if it's a negative number, then we tell them it's an error. It must be a positive number. Now, if it's a positive number, then we're going to get out of this loop. Okay, now before we do that though, if it's a number over 10, we're going to cap it at 10 and tell them that. And then we're going to add it to our total, and then we're going to break. So what this break does is it breaks out of the while true, but then brings you up to the next hole. Okay, so we're still inside an outer loop of 9 holes, but this break brings us out of the inner loop where we're just trying to get a score for a hole. sorry, a hole, that doesn't sound right, for a single hole, that sounds better. Sorry, I didn't mean to swear there. That was kind of funny. I'll leave that in. So if we didn't enter a score of over 10, then we just add it to the total and we go break to the next hole. All right, but either way, we're adding plus equals to the total. So by the time we're done, the total is going to be the sum of all 9 shots. And then we come out of our loop after 9 holes and we print down here what our final score is. All right, so this one program is a great summary of everything we learned last week. So let's just review that with this worksheet, and then we're going to continue to today's tkinter assignments. So one of the things I left from last week was this example here. Keep repeating until the user enters a valid grade between 9 and 12. If the user enters something that is not a number, prevent that program from crashing. Okay, so we did a program like this similar last week, but let's just write out this part of it here. All right, so for starters, we want to keep repeating until the user does something. So that's not a for loop, that's a while true. While true, if you remember, is we keep going until we get what we're looking for. All right, now if you're doing this on a worksheet in Google Docs, it's going to want to capitalize the W. We know in Python we don't, so we leave it like that. This T in true, however, is capitalized, so leave that as while true. All right, so now we're going to ask for a grade. So we're going to say grade, and then it's going to be an integer, and it's going to be an input, right? So then we're going to ask the person, enter grade from 9 to 12. All right, so we're telling the person, you know, what we're looking for. So I need 3 brackets here. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this is to close off the input, and this is to close off the one bracket. Actually, let me just fix this up a bit. I don't need that bracket. There we go. So that's how it should be. All right, now because this might be an error because they may not enter an integer, I'm actually going to cut this and move it down to here instead. So I'll just put it like that. Okay, and up here I'm going to put try. Okay, so this is going to try to get a grade as an integer. Now if we don't get a grade, then this code out down here in except is going to run. All right, and we always do 2 things. We print an error message. So we say error must be a number, because remember, this code isn't going to run unless they don't enter a number. So if it gets down here, that's what's happened, so we're going to tell them that. All right, and then we're going to put in this magic word continue. Okay, so what does that do? Goes back up to top of loop. Okay, so if we don't do the except, then we're down here, which means we did enter a valid number, but now we got to make sure it's between 9 and 12. So we're going to say, like, if grade greater than equal to 9, and at the same time grade is less than or equal to 12, right, then we can break. I can even put the break on the same line if I want to, or I can put it down here. And I can just say, like, else, and then here I'll just say print error must be a grade from 9 to 12. Okay, so this is a different error than the one we're printing up here. This error is going to be caused if we type in something that's not an integer, in which case we're going to continue and try again. Okay, but the other place we could continue is down here. Now we don't need to say continue down here because when you get to the bottom of the loop, it automatically continues back up to the top. All right, but this continue just means to start here going back up. So we go up to the top earlier. Okay, so that's an example of a while true. And my last example, which I like a lot, is this one down here, which is writing a program that asks the user how many grocery items they've purchased and lets them enter the price of each item one at a time, and then it'll print a total. So here's a sample of what that output can look like. Now we can write this both ways. We can write this as a while true and as a for loop. So you know, we're going to do both so you can see the difference. All right, so at the top the program starts the same way no matter what. All right, so we're going to have like a total that starts out as 0. Okay, that's going to be our running total of our items, regardless of what kind of loop we're using. All right, so then I'm going to have like I'll have like items equals input how many items, right? I'll just leave it like that. Maybe make it a little bit shorter. All right, now because this is an integer, I actually have room, so I thought I might as well just leave it to here to go like this. Items equals int items. right? And we can either do this all in one line of code, or we can take it as an input and then convert it to a number down here. So whichever way you prefer is fine. All right, so now we'll use the for loop first. So in a for loop, we're going to go from 1 to items. So we're going to go like for x in range, 1, comma, items. Okay, so we're saying let x equal the number 1 up to and including items, which means I have to go items plus 1 actually. Okay, so it'll go up to there. All right, so then I'm going to go like, price equals input, and I'll just go like enter item %d. Okay, just to keep it, a little bit so I have room, right? And then that's going to be, of course, %x, trying to fit this all in here. Yeah, I think that does it. Okay, and then on the next line I'm going to say like price equals float price. So I'm going to do that same thing again where I use 2 lines to get in a number. All right, so now I'm just going to say price, total plus equals price. Okay, so we're adding the price to the total. Okay, and then that's basically it. And then when we come back out, we're just going to print total is %.2f, right? And then that's going to be a placeholder for the total. So I'll just go %total, and we are done. All right, so that would be a way to use a for loop to go from 1 up to items, and then it's going to just have me enter each item one at a time, and then add that to the total, and then when we're done out of the loop, we print the total. Okay, now over in the while true loop, it's a bit more work. So basically, use a for loop when you can, guys, but I just want to show you as a meaning of an exercise how we can write this as a while true loop. So we need another variable called item count. Okay, and this is going to keep track of which item we're on. Okay, so to be sure, items is how many items we have, but the for loop uses x as the counter. In the while true, we have to create our own variable to do the same kind of thing, but it'll still work. Okay, so now with item count at 0, I'm going to say while true, and then the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add 1 to item count. Okay, so I'm going to say like item count plus equals 1. Okay, now the for loop does that for me automatically, right? It increases x by 1 at a time. But without it, we have to do it ourselves. We have to do it manually. All right, so then this line here is going to be the same. Enter item and then x. So I'll put this down here. Okay, except in this case, we're not using x anymore, right? We're using this other variable called item count. Actually, let me just call it count. And I'll just change this to be count as well, just so we have a room for everything. Okay, but basically count is the same as x. So the for loop does it for us, but here we're using this variable count to do the exact same thing. Okay, and then these 2 lines are actually the same as well. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this line, like we're going to convert price to a float, just like we did before, and we're going to add price to total, just like we did before. Okay, but now we have to write a little bit more code to tell the loop when to end. Okay, so basically, when this count reaches the total of items I have, we can break. Okay, so I'm going to basically say that right here. I'm going to say if count equals items. Okay, that means we've added all of our items in. So we're finished adding items. And then I'm just going to say colon break. Okay, and then the very last line of code is going to be the same for both as well. All right, now I'm not, to keep the video short, I'm just going to leave it at that. Now normally in class we would probably write these programs out, both versions, just to test it out to see that they both work exactly the same way. I'm going to leave that as an exercise for you. I'm pretty sure I got the code right. If you try it and you find a mistake, please let me know in the emails or comments, and I will come back and fix it. But I'm pretty sure that's going to work for both. All right, so when you see that, guys, you probably think to yourself, well, the for loop's a better way to go. And you're right, it is. Now, that doesn't mean we should always use a for loop, though, because sometimes we can't use a for loop. You guys already know that the while true is really meant for those times when we just don't know how long it's going to repeat. So sometimes you have no choice. But when you do have a choice, a for loop is a better way to go. Okay? And I threw this last question in here just as a, a last ditch thing to go over. Try, except, and continue. What does that do in a while true loop? Well, we've already seen that, so let's just put it into words. Okay, so try will attempt a line of code that might cause an error, right? So we know that's first. So just like when you try something, like we'll just try it, right? We try something knowing that it might not work out. So that's what this try is basically doing. Except we'll say provide code to run in case an error happens. Okay, and then continue will send you back up to the top of the loop right away. Okay, or like send the code up to the top. Okay, to start again, right? To start over, we'll say. Okay, so that's basically what those three things combined will do. Okay, and that's just a great way to cause the program to keep running even if errors do happen, and to find a more graceful way to get the user to do what you want them to do. All right, and that first example from today basically covers that, right, where we did this try for a grade. If it's not an integer, we're going to get an exception, and then we're going to go up and try again. And if it isn't an error, then it'll skip all of this and come down here, but then we still got to check to make sure it's a proper grade. And if it is, we break out of the loop, else we print this error. And because there's nowhere else to go, guys, after this print statement, it's going to come right back up and it's going to start all over again until we get a proper grade. All right, I think that's good for our first part of the lesson today, just sort of a recap and a review. In the next video, we're going to take a look at the assignments that we're going to do this week. All right, so I'll just, since I'm still running this video, I'll show you really quickly what those are. Okay, so the first one is going to be a match game, where we're going to just type in a number and we're going to click match, and it's going to just keep generating numbers until it matches the one that I typed in. This is almost the same program as the sevens program we did last week, where we keep going till we get a 7. The only difference is this is in tkinterland, so we're working with a list again, just like we did with the weight program from 2 weeks ago. All right, so I'll help you get started on that. It'll count until we match, and then you notice here in this example, it didn't match my number until it got to number 291. Okay, now this is programmed to go from 1 to 100, so if we try to match a number that's not in that range, we're going to get stuck in this never-ending loop. So we're also going to write code to make sure that the person has in fact put in a number that we're looking for. Now in that case, we don't necessarily need a while true, as you'll see, but we can find another way to prevent this rest of the thing happening unless we type in a valid number, like you see down here. Okay, and then the last program, which I'm kind of sad we aren't doing this in class, guys, because it's a fun program. It's basically a slot machine simulator. So you pull the lever, and these three symbols are going to start spinning around or moving around. And then if you get 2 of a kind or you get 3 of a kind, you win some money. But if you don't get 3 matches, then you lose money, just like a regular slot machine. All right, so those will be the 2 that we work with in the upcoming video. So I will see you there.